DreAllDay.com.
Baldwin, DreAllDay.com, balloverseas.com, overseasbasketballblueprint.com. This video here, I'm going to talk about how overseas basketball works, just the general basics of how it works, why it is how it is, and just clear up some things that I see as common misperceptions that people have about basketball overseas. And the people who have these misperceptions range from casual fans. Some of you might just be casual fans just trying to find out what is this whole overseas basketball thing. Sometimes I hear from family members and significant others who want to help somebody that you know who might want to play overseas ball or has hinted at interest in playing ball overseas. And some of you players who want to play ball overseas but you don't even know how it goes. I'm going to make this video so that you understand exactly how things go overseas, why they work the way they work, and why certain players who you may know of or players you might not have heard of, how players end up playing overseas and things like that. So this is going to be a general overall, just an informational video so you understand how overseas ball works. Now, I'm going to tell you up front that I wrote an article about it that is right here. I got it pulled up on my phone, How Overseas Basketball Works, a detailed guide for unknowing players and casual fans. You can read this article by going to DreAllDay.com/athletes with an S on the end. DreAllDay.com/athletes. That's where this article is, but I'm making a video version right now so you understand it. So when I was playing, even nowadays when I talk to people and they ask me, well, what do you do? Or people ask me these days, what do you do? I say, well, I play basketball professionally, or I used to play basketball professionally. Of course, people usually ask, well, okay, well, who'd you play for, or where'd you play at? Because there's only 30 teams in the NBA, so everybody's heard of the teams in the NBA. So then they're looking at me like, wait a minute, is he famous? Should I know this guy? And I tell people I played professional ball overseas. And most people, 99% of people, know nothing about basketball overseas, at least Americans, know nothing about basketball overseas. So then they'll start asking questions like, well, what team were you on? What league is it? Or how does it work? What country were you in? Where'd you travel to? So people start asking all these questions. How does it work? What league is that? Do you play against other countries? Have you ever thought about playing professional? Like I told people I play overseas, they're like, well, you ever thought about going pro? And they don't even understand that overseas basketball is professional the same way that the NBA or the G League is professional basketball. So any of you who's ever had that kind of conversation, you probably can relate to this and know exactly what I'm talking about. So here's the first basic. Every country in the world, well, most of them, not every single country, but most countries who have basketball, they have their own league the same way that America has the NBA. So America has the NBA, Canada has a basketball league, Mexico has leagues, Spain has leagues, France, Italy, Finland, Norway, Sweden, China, they all have basketball. They either have a basketball league or usually many of them have basketball leagues, plural, meaning they have different levels. So the NBA, in the USA, you got the NBA, and you have the G League, and then you have a bunch of minor leagues that are going around. What do they call them? Semi-pro leagues, where people don't play. That's not their full-time job to play on the basketball team. You might have a regular full-time job as an accountant or a lawyer, probably not a lawyer, but an auto mechanic, or you're the manager at Target, and then you play in those semi-pro games 2 or 3 times a week, and maybe you travel a little bit around the area playing games. Maybe you get paid, maybe you don't. But the point is there are different levels of leagues in America. There aren't that many leagues, but there are different levels of leagues, and the same thing in Germany. Germany, you got the first league, second league, third league. Germany got like 15 levels of leagues. And they're all the way at the bottom levels, you got people who work regular 9 to 5s, but then they play on the basketball team. They might get paid, they might not. And then you have people at the highest level who might make $1 million and make $750,000 a year playing basketball. European guys and American people who are doing this. And in between, you have all different levels. People at all different levels from $0 to $2 million a year. There are people all in between, and I did a video on how much money you can make playing ball overseas. So if you didn't watch that video, you could probably see it in the, what do they call it, the watch later, the related videos, probably right here to my left as you're watching this. So every country has its own league, same way America has the NBA. Now here's the other thing you got to understand, because usually when you tell people you play ball overseas, people are thinking, all right, professional athlete, they usually are trying to think how much money they think you made. And this is usually how the questions go, at least when I'm talking to people. I don't know how it goes with you all, but when I talk to people, I can kind of see the wheels turning in their head. And sometimes nobody usually comes out and asks me directly, but people allude to it because they're trying to figure out, what your money was like and things like that. And especially with the places that I live, since I've been living in Miami, all the places that I've lived, people are looking at me and they're trying to gauge, like, how do you afford to live in these places that you're living in? Then when you tell them you play ball, they're like, oh, you made your money playing ball. when actually I make money being an entrepreneur as well. But they don't even want to hear about that. They just want to care about the basketball thing because it's more off the beaten path. Like entrepreneur, anybody could be an entrepreneur. Not anybody could be a professional athlete. So anyway, unlike the NBA, international basketball doesn't have a players union. So like I talked about in the money video, which should be over here, when you play ball internationally, there is no pay scale, meaning there's no limit on how much you can make. There's no salary cap. There's also no salary floor. In the NBA, you have both. There's a minimum salary. There's also a maximum salary. So everybody in the league is somewhere in between those. Overseas, there is none, which means you can make as much as you can negotiate or as little as you negotiate or whatever it is that you accept. And life is only 3 ways to make money. It's what you demand, what you negotiate, or what you accept. There's only 3 ways you make money in anything that you do in life. So the situation when it comes to money playing overseas is wide open. Okay, so sometimes people reach out to me and say, well, Dre, I'm trying to find out for my son because he's thinking about playing ball overseas after college, how much money can he make? And I explain to the father or the mother or the girlfriend or the boyfriend or whoever it is, listen, there is no set amount of money that you can make. You can talk to maybe an agent who has worked in a certain country because every country has different ways that they do things, different ways that they deal with Americans. And I'm making this video mostly with an American basketball player in mind. So different countries have different ways that they pay Americans, meaning an American at this level of a league in this country usually makes in this range. Or an American at this level of league in this country, they make a different range. So it's different in each country. Again, overseas is not one country. All right, overseas is every other country in the world. And when I say overseas here, I'm also including places where you don't have to actually cross a body of water to go play. So for example, Mexico, or we can even say Canada, or if you go to South America, you don't have to go over a sea in order to play, but I'm calling all of that overseas so everybody understands it. So how much money you can make is wide open. You make what you negotiate or what you accept or what you have the power, the negotiating power to command. All right, that's how much money you're going to make. Watch the video on overseas money and you'll understand exactly what I mean. Now, when you do play overseas, some things that you usually get, almost always the team will give you a place to stay. All right, that is almost always a guarantee. They'll give you a place to stay so that you can lay your head. Now, is it going to be a super nice place? Is it going to be as nice as what you're used to in America? Depends on what you have in America and depends on what you consider to be nice. All right, this is just how it is. So sometimes it's a really nice place. Sometimes they'll show you what it is and give you pictures and stuff like that. And if you have an agent, usually your agent will work these things out before you even accept the contract. But if you don't have an agent or you're a low-level player or you're accepting an entry-level job, it'll be suitable, the place that you're staying in. I remember the first place I stayed in when I started my career was in Lithuania. It was a dump. The place is pretty much a dump, but I didn't even complain about it because where the hell was I going to go? Secondly, who was I going to complain to? And third, I was just happy to be starting my career. I was happy to say that I was playing pro basketball and I had a contract and I was getting paid. So I was just happy. I didn't care what the living conditions were. It's not like I was going to leave if they didn't fix the living conditions. So they will give you a place to stay. Often the team will also give you meals. They may give you 1 meal a day, like every day will give you dinner, or every day will give you lunch, or they'll give you 2 meals. They'll give you lunch and dinner. Or some teams will take care of all your meals, depending on the deal, the contract that you're under. Or sometimes they won't give you any meals, but they pay you money, and you go get your own food, and you just got to figure it out, and you got to get it how you live. Again, this is all part of whatever you are able to negotiate, whatever you're able to demand, or whatever you choose to accept. So the living arrangement, a place to stay, is usually almost always included, but the food is negotiable. All right, everybody understand that? The food is negotiable. When I was in Montenegro, for example, we got 2 meals a day. Well, 2 meals a day was in my contract. So 2 meals a day, I would go to a certain restaurant, the same place, and I would just sit down and they would just bring me food. All right, the guy who ran it barely spoke any English, so it's not like I can go in there and be like, yo, I want this and this, because he couldn't have understood me. The menu wasn't even that big. So he realized by the second day, like, all right, this guy, we can't communicate, so I'm gonna just give him different meals each day. So each time I went there, he would make something different. It's kind of like a meal delivery service where you don't choose the meals, like the one I have now in South Florida. I don't tell them what meals I want. They just bring me different stuff every day, and I'm good with it. I tell them what I don't like, certain foods I don't want. They take that out, and then they bring me the food. So it's the same thing overseas. Sometimes they'll tell you, go to this restaurant, and they'll bring you food, or they'll give you food twice a day, or 3 times a day, or once a day, or whatever the deal is. It might be even a local, like a grocery store, and they'll tell you, like, yo, you can spend 50 euros every 3 days, or you got 100 euros a month, or whatever it is, and the people in the store know to just charge it to the team's account or whoever it is that arranged that for you. So you can negotiate and set up how it's going to work when it comes to your food. Because when you go to another country, if you're not speaking the language of that country and you don't know anything about the food, you got to figure out how you're going to eat. And you don't want to be eating. There's only so many times you can eat a cheeseburger and fries because that's the only thing you know how to say before you're going to want some variety in your meals. So that is something that you need to be thinking about, or something that any player should consider. And you could also just make some friends. Your teammates can speak the local language because there'll be some people who are from that country and they can help you get along. You could meet a girl or a guy, or ask the team manager, or use your phone, use Google and get a translator and figure out how to say things. So the food and the housing, that's the way that goes. That's part of your negotiation when you accept a playing opportunity. Now, when it comes to the way overseas basketball leagues work, as I already explained to you, each country has their own league, or leagues, plural. But there are a couple of leagues where the top teams in all of, we'll just say Europe, we'll just use Europe as an example here, they play in their country's league, but they also come together and play in a bigger league that is called the Euroleague. There's another league called the Euro Cup. There was one, I know when I was playing, there was one called the ULEB Cup. I don't know if they still do that, but I know the Euro Cup and the Euroleague both still exist. And what are they? That's basically taking the top teams in the league and they play it in another season all at the same time they're playing their regular season. So for example, let's say there's a team in Spain, or a team in Barcelona, and there is a team in Barcelona. They play in the Spanish league, so they play against other teams in Spain, the top division in Spain, and then in the middle of their season, at different points in the season, and it's actually all mixed in the schedule, they'll play it in Euroleague games. So the Spanish team in Barcelona, they'll play against the team Olympiacos from Greece, and then they'll play against a team from Russia, PAOK, and then they'll play against a team from whatever other countries are in the Euroleague. Every year, it doesn't change all every year, but a few teams come out and a few teams go in every single year. So they play the Euroleague season at the same time they're playing their country's season. And I believe there are 24 teams in the Euroleague, and they play about 24 games, something like that. I believe it's 24 games in the season. I may be wrong on that exact number. Y'all can look that up. And then they have seedings, and a certain number of teams make the playoffs, and they have playoffs and a championship. And the EuroLeague championship is the biggest championship in the basketball world outside of the NBA championship. So the NBA has just 30 NBA teams. They play against each other, and you have playoffs and the champion. And the EuroLeague is the same thing, except every team that's in the EuroLeague, they don't just ditch their national country's league. They still play in their country's league and try to win that championship, and they play in the EuroLeague and try to win the EuroLeague championship. So a team could win their country's championship and win the EuroLeague championship. So they get two trophies at the same time every year. And the reason why teams still play in there, because you might be wondering, or if you know anything about this, you might wonder, why would a team, if they're good enough to play in the EuroLeague and win the championship of all of the Europe outside of the NBA, basically the second championship of the world, if they could win that, why would they even play in their local national league? Because often in the local national league of any country, the teams at the bottom of that league are no match for these teams that are in the EuroLeague. The EuroLeague teams have the best players. They got Americans who are top-level guys, D1 guys, people you probably watched on TV in March Madness, but now they're playing overseas. You wonder what happened to them. They're playing overseas. These teams that play in the EuroLeague have really, really good players, and they're playing against some teams in their local country league that are just no match for them. They're beating these teams by 40, 50 points every game. So why even play in that league? Why risk somebody getting injured and put the extra miles on everybody's legs and even compete when you know you could probably dominate most of these teams, and it's a pretty close thing that you're probably going to win the championship. If you're going to win the championship in your national league if you're dominating the Euro League. So why even play? And it's because overseas teams people and teams, I would even say outside of basketball, aren't driven the same way that us Americans are driven. In America, everything is about, especially in professional sports, everything's about the dollar, right? It's all about the individual. It's about the shine. Overseas, a lot of teams play more for pride in their city or in their country, or in their city or their country or the team that they cheer for, more than it's about the money. And this is why if you were to watch an overseas basketball game, or if you happen to be lucky enough to go to a game overseas, you'll notice that the fans are super duper passionate, and it's not because they just want the team to win and get the trophy. It's because they're really passionate about that team, and that team represents the city, or they're representing the country, and that's why those teams and those fans get so passionate about it, which is why an American has to be very careful, because we're raised in this individualized culture, or at least when it comes to basketball. Then we go overseas and we're thinking we're going to be the individual, James Harden, Steph Curry. That kind of style doesn't fly over there. You got to go over there and integrate with the team, and you got to care more about the team and the pride of the city than you do about your own individual gains. Because if you're playing like you only care about your individual gains, they will fire you even if you're putting up great stats. And trust me, I've seen it happen to many players. Now, I just explained to you, Euroleague is also the Euro Cup. They play in their own leagues, but every other team in the leagues, they just play in their local, national, their country's league, whatever division that they happen to be in. Now, some players have asked me about, Dre, what if you go overseas and you don't really speak the language? Is it hard dealing with a language barrier, playing on the court, dealing with other people, buying food and things like that? For the most part, if somebody's the age, I'm age 38, so if somebody's 40 or younger, for the most part, almost everybody speaks English. It might not be their first language, but almost everybody can speak English. So if you just walk down the street, any place that I played overseas, I would just be walking down the street and I would see people and make eye contact with them. Of course, they could tell I wasn't from there and that I was an American. I was a basketball player because I'm tall. I'm not super duper tall, but I'm tall. And they could all speak English. All right, so you talk to them. They might not be fluent in English, but they can speak English. So you say, yo, I want some spaghetti, or you go to a restaurant and say, I want some bread and a cheeseburger. They know what you're talking about. If you can describe something, they can give it to you pretty well. And nowadays, we all got these. And as long as you got internet access, you could just pull it up on your phone, show them a picture of it. Like, yo, I want some soda right here. Or I want some, I need some socks. Or whatever it is you're trying to get, you can communicate with people. And on a basketball court, the language of basketball is universal. So if the coach wants you to set a screen, all right, you'll know that it wants you to set a screen, even if they don't speak English. So I had a few coaches who did not speak English, but if they were saying set a screen, I knew what they meant. If they want me to shoot a three-pointer, I can understand. They say cut to the basket or play defense or be in the right spot. They can communicate that in a way that you can understand, even if you don't speak the same language, because the basketball language is universal. And on top of that, you'll probably have teammates who speak English. All right, on one team I was on, maybe 3 of my teammates spoke English, but those 3 guys were like fluent English speakers. I could just have a whole conversation with them in English and you could barely tell that they weren't from the United States. So there will always be people who speak English. And over the years, as years go, more and more of our culture, American culture, especially through TV and media, social media, is sweeping across the whole world, which means more and more young people who are growing up are knowing English because they're looking at our video, they're looking at our YouTube, they're looking at our Netflix, they're looking at our social media, they're on our Instagrams, they're watching people like me and you talk every single day, so they're learning English very much. So I said people 40 and under, almost all of them speak English. In 5 years, it's going to be people 45 and under, and every year it's going to get bigger and bigger to the point 50 years from now, pretty much everybody in the world, especially if you go overseas to play ball, everybody will be speaking English. So you don't have a problem with language barrier. None of that's going to stop you from doing what you want to do. Now, next point is people asking about the NBA. Sometimes people have asked me, well, why does such and such player, or you might have wondered at some point, why does such and such player who, maybe somebody who played D1 ball, they played at a high-level college program, played March Madness, they got drafted into the NBA, they didn't stick around with the team, then they go play overseas, and you don't hear about them for the next 8 years because they've been playing overseas. Why would somebody go overseas instead of staying in the NBA or trying out for the G League or something like that? Well, usually that's a matter of finances. So a player who plays at a high D1 level, because I already told you that the money can be whatever amount. It can be $0, it can be $1 billion because there's no salary cap. A player who played at a high D1, let's say somebody who played at Duke, all right, and they were pretty good at Duke. They're probably going to get drafted, or they'll at least get invited to a summer league or a training camp with an NBA team. And when a player goes, and I'm going to do a whole video just on this subject alone, so I'm going to keep it brief in this description. When a player goes to that team, they might make the roster, they might not, or they might be sitting at the end of the bench, or they might end up getting cut or released in the middle of the season, and then they'll end up going overseas. Thing is, a player who played at a high-level D1 school can get a bigger contract for more guaranteed money overseas than they might get sitting on the end of the bench in the NBA. And any of you can go Google the salaries in the G League. If a player can make 6 figures playing overseas, why would they spend a whole year playing in the G League? The only reason the player plays in the G League is because they want to win that lottery ticket of getting called up to the NBA, where you can make a whole lot of money, of course, and you're playing at the highest league in the world. So there will be players who are good enough. Every player who's playing in the G League, most of them, 99% of them, are good enough to go overseas and get a contract that's worth 10 times what they're making in the G League. Every single one of them. So why do they play in the G League? Because they get drafted to the NBA, or they get called up to the NBA. They get an even bigger contract than they get overseas, and they're playing in the NBA, and they're in America, and they got their family with them, and all the amenities and luxuries that come with being an NBA player that even overseas teams can't match. So it's kind of like this gamble, this guessing game, not even a guessing game, but a gamble that you're taking if you're a player who's good enough to get a high-level European contract, but instead you decide to go to an NBA training camp, or you decide to go play in the G League. And again, when I do the full video on this, I'm going to explain this to you in detail so you understand why a player might just go overseas rather than trying out for the Knicks, or going to training camp with the Warriors, or sitting at the end of the bench with the Pelicans. Why just go overseas instead of trying to get that shot in the league? There are good reasons for this, especially the older you get, those reasons become more solidified. So the reason I'm telling you all that is to tell you this: playing overseas is not necessarily better, quote unquote, or worse than playing in the NBA. Than playing, at least if you're talking about a guy who is not like LeBron James. LeBron can play for any NBA team anytime he wants. But he can call them and tell them, I'm going to come play for you. But most players aren't LeBron. All right, I would say the bottom 20% of NBA players, those are the guys who are like the 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th guy on the bench on every NBA team. That's 120 players, right? 4 guys times 30 teams. Those 120 guys can all be swapped out with 120 Americans who are playing overseas right now, and it wouldn't be any drop-off in skill level. All right, so the bottom 20% or 25% of players who are playing in the NBA right now could be replaced with players who are playing in Europe right now, and they're not any better or worse than those guys. So this is all just a balancing act that you got to play as a basketball player, just thinking about not only your career on the court, but you got to think about your money. You got to think about the fact you have a very small window to make money as a pro athlete. You got to think about your family, if you have a wife, if you have kids. All of these things had to be factored in. It's not just about, oh, I get to play for the Warriors or I got to go to Europe. There's a whole lot of other things that factor into it that a lot of players don't think about, and a lot of casual fans never even consider. So that's what you need to understand. Now, next point is about the G League. G League's the NBA's minor league. There are, I think, 30 teams by this point, or close to it. There soon will be 10 players on each roster. That's 300 players. Good thing about the G League is that that's 300 new jobs for professional basketball players. And every player who takes a G League job means that's one more job that's available for a team overseas for a player to go play overseas. A player like you, maybe, if you aren't playing in the G League. Every player who goes to the G League is a good thing for you, because now they're not taking a job overseas. They could possibly go to you or somebody who's a level higher than you. Then you can get that next job just right under it. So whatever it will be. Everybody, again, understands the financial situation in the G League. It's not a lot of money you make playing in the G League. It's probably the worst deal a player, or not probably, but it is the worst deal you could take. If you're a player who thinks you're good enough to play in the NBA and you're close to it, close enough that the G League team takes you seriously and signs you, you can make way more money playing overseas. But you take the G League deal, again, to get your shot playing overseas. And that's the only, get your shot playing in the NBA. And that's the only reason anybody plays in the G League. All right, the travel, the living conditions, the money, none of it is luxurious. Let's just put it that way. Next thing. I'm just going through my article here about overseas basketball and how it works. All right, overseas players, when it comes to the lifestyle off the court, when you're not playing and you're not practicing, you're going to have a whole lot of free time on your hands. One of the greatest things about being a professional athlete in any sport, and I'll just talk about basketball because that's the sport that I played professionally, is that you have a ton of free time. All right, your actual work time, the time where you're on the clock working, is much less than the average entrepreneur. I work way more as an entrepreneur now than I ever worked as a basketball player. It's much less than an entrepreneur or a lawyer or a branch manager at a bank or somebody who's running a McDonald's. You're going to work 8 hours a day at any of those other jobs. Basketball players do not work 8 hours a day. All right, practice will be like 2 hours. Let's say it's a day, it was no game. Your practice is going to be 2 hours, and let's say you're a super duper hard worker, so you put in an hour before practice and an hour after practice. Physically, you cannot train for 8 hours a day. Okay, so you could do 4 hours maybe on a good day, and you're not going to be going super 1,000% effort level for 4 hours total any day in any sport. I don't care how energetic you are, how motivated you are. That's not humanly possible. It's not scientifically possible. Okay, so that's why basketball players have a lot of time on their hands. On a game day, you got the time for the game. You might get there early and you might be there a little bit after the game is over. You're looking at a maximum of about 4 hours of work per day. All right, not counting travel if you're if you're traveling with the team or anything like that. That's pretty much it. So you got a lot of time on your hands. So this is why you see basketball players playing video games, starting their own brands, designing merchandise, making rap albums, creating content, doing these things, because they have so much time on their hands, because there's only so much work you can do every day when your job is to use your physical body. Body has limits, even when you're a professional athlete in the top 1% of the world. So there's a lot of things that athletes can do. And as you've seen, you see athletes out there starting businesses, doing investments, or doing nothing, wasting time DMing chicks on Instagram, whatever it is they want to do. But there's plenty of time on their hands for every athlete, no matter how good or bad of a player they are. Every athlete has time on their hands, and some of them you know what they're doing with their time because they're showing you, and some of them you don't, but everybody has that time. No athlete is working out 8 hours a day. All right, I don't care what you think you're doing or what you call yourself doing, you amateur player who's talking about you're working hard and all this. Players be leaving me comments or sending me emails talking about, Dre, I be training 7 hours a day all summer and I didn't get any better. I'm like, bullshit. You didn't train for 7 hours a day. No, your body is not capable of that level of output. Not doing a serious training. You might be out there bullshitting for 7 hours a day. You can't go hard for 7 hours a day. All right, but anyway, that's a different topic for a different day. But that's everything I wanted to say about how overseas basketball works. I think this video is long enough. If anybody has any questions that I didn't address here, either I've already made a video about it, which will be over here, or you look in the playlist. I think the playlist will be up there, overseas pro basketball playlist, or you can leave a comment and let me know about something that I have not yet addressed, or you can just stay subscribed to me here wherever you're watching this, because I'm making a bunch of videos about overseas ball. I've already made a bunch, but I'm making a bunch more to make sure I address every possible question about this whole world of overseas basketball, so that you got it. Now, if you didn't get the free download, 46 things you need to know before you go play basketball overseas, go to balloverseas.com/46. That's the number 46. balloverseas.com/46. 46 things you need to know before you go play ball overseas. It's a free downloadable guide. You can get it to your phone within the time it takes me to say the sentence. I'll put the link down in the video description as well. But if it's not, balloverseas.com/46. Work on your game. Dre all day.